evening, potentially good morning. Welcome to the Art of Avoiding a Train Wreck session named after my latest book, which has just had its first birthday, The Art of Avoiding a Train Wreck, Practical Tips and Tricks for Launching and Operating SAFe Agile Release Trains. And it's a book I wrote with my business partner, Adrian Wilson, who is busy earning some money today so I can hang out with you guys. That's apparently how this goes. So my name is Em, which hopefully you got by now. I am the founder of Pretty Agile, the business named after the blog that Phil mentioned earlier, which is also Pretty Agile. Which is also my Twitter handle, which is where it all came from, actually. It all started with a Twitter handle and some beers in my office trying to think of a Twitter handle, to which we landed with Pretty Agile. Quick search for a Twitter handle, quick search for a domain name. No one had any of them, and it was done. So when I started my own business, it seemed obvious that was going to be the name of it. For those who'd like to tweet at Pretty Agile, for those who'd like to connect on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find me there. And you can email me as well, and occasionally I reply. All right. So where do we start if we're going to launch an Agile release train? I realise I sound like a SAFe textbook, but I've got to tell you, when it comes to the art of avoiding a train wreck, if you want your organization to succeed with SAFe, if you want your organization to succeed with launching an Agile release train, then people need to know what they're doing. I have a really simple view on training, and you're probably going to hear me say this a number of times. If you want people to change, you have a moral obligation to give them the information on how it is you want them to behave in the new paradigm. So, as Phil kind of implied at the beginning, I feel like I've been around this space forever. I can remember conversations with Dean about, getting leaders in a class for 2 days. I can remember people arguing with Dean about how realistic is that. And, back as far as I can remember, Dean would say, if you can't get them in the classroom for 2 days, don't bother. Don't bother. They're not going to go say, nothing's going to come of it. Don't bother. I have the same view. I've worked places where people don't have any understanding of the method, and it's always a nightmare. So get leaders in the room. I always say your transformation will be as successful as the most senior bought-in leader. So if you can get the CEO in the room, then you're going to have pretty nice buy-in from that entire organization. You get a general manager in the room, you get everyone who works for that general manager or VP or SVP bought in, and everybody else doing their own thing. And see some nods, which says to me some of you have also seen this. Of course, the big question, does it matter who teaches the course? Phil, stop setting me up. Does it matter who teaches the course? In my opinion, absolutely. Are there really 15,000 SPCs? Wow. I suspect you're right. Yes. Okay. Wow. Look, I think it does. One of the things I'm, I guess, well known for saying is not all SPCs are created equal. So SPC, SAFe Program Consultant, the people who can teach a leading SAFe course. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, but the way that has always worked is to be allowed to teach leading SAFe. All you have to do is turn up at a 4-day class, attend the 4 days and pass the exam. Does that make you a teacher? I suspect not. If anyone, for those of you who have tried to teach leading SAFe courseware or any of the SAFe courseware, it can be really difficult to do without experience. It's something that used to come up in the classroom a lot, actually. How can I teach this if I've never done it? And I'm like, why would you teach this if you've never done it? I don't know how to answer that. Or how do I teach if I've never taught before? Why do you think it's a good idea to teach now if you've never taught before. I mean, you can certainly build that skill, but a 4-day implementing SAFe class is not going to make you a training genius. And these are really just really hard classes to run without experience. In terms of my journey, I was very lucky. There was no training when I started, so I had to read books and then work out how to do it. And when I started training, I trained in previous careers, but when I started training SAFe, I already had the experience because the experience predated the courseware for me. So look, more directly to your question, Phil, how do you pick? Look for someone with experience. You should be able, your LinkedIn profile, their trainer profile on Scaled Agile, what company they work for, their level of certification. So SPCs, as you said, there are 15,000. I think there are less than 100 SPCTs, and there are, I don't know, about 30 SAFe fellows. So there's a clue there. But look for experience. I used to have a client actually who, when she was asked this question, would always say, find people who have really done stuff. That was the advice she'd give people. Find people who have actually done stuff. And I think that would be true. Some battle scars will go a long way in terms of credibility in the classroom. So long answer to a short leading question from Phil there. So hopefully you make this happen. Try to avoid I'm going to do a 1-day executive workshop and it's all going to be wonderful. It won't get you the same effect. One of the silliest things I did many years ago, I had a client convince me to give them a 2-hour overview of SAFe until they had time to take leading SAFe. And then some of the leaders followed through on the deal we made, which was for them to then come and take the class. But others were very quick to tell people in their organisation who were trying to get them into classes that they had had a special briefing from M. So yeah, it can be an interesting journey. Anyway, hopefully you get some leaders in a classroom and you want to launch a train, so you're going to have to find a train. So textbook SAFe is going to tell you find an operational value stream, find a development value stream, find agile release trains, and that's great. And if you have the organizational buy-in to do that, awesome. Will you get more strategic trains? Absolutely. But I wouldn't go so far as to say if you can't find the perfect train, don't launch. I would say find a train and go. Because the way you create momentum in your organization is you start to show a pattern that works. And I've worked with all sorts of trains. I've worked with trains that are, single systems, departments, a set of systems or departments, part of an ecosystem. Are any of them ideal? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm not sure that it matters. I think it matters that you can wrap your arms around the problems. That's the way I used to talk about it a lot. Find the 50 to 100 people you can wrap your arms around, and you can actually lead that group and use them as your proof point. So, Brian, what's the number one gotcha that a less experienced SPC RTE typically faces in your experience? On train launches, Brian, or on choosing a train? It's a big question.
A little bit of both, I guess. I mean, can be for both, but yeah, when choosing a train first, what's the number one obstacle that you've seen?
Look, I think a lot of them can be solved. I find a lot of folks choose a train that is probably too small, and in terms of they've picked up some part of the technology ecosystem and said, you're the train, and everybody around that has been ignored. But if you do good SAFe, which we're going to try and talk about, you should solve for that, right? So your inspect and adapt and working the process should start to identify the things that are not on the train, that need to be part of the train for the train to be successful. So I feel like you can grow that. I think the biggest gotcha in some ways might be coming up in a couple of slides, Brian. So just bear with me for a second as I think about the gotchas for train design. Anyway, short to the point. Pick a train, 50 to 100 people that have to work together. That's my only rule here, right? Have to work together. Do not pick up 5 to 10 random project teams and make them do PI planning and call them a train. That makes everybody miserable. So don't do that. 50 to 100 people that have to work together, have a reason to coordinate, and you're in a not bad place. Once you've picked your train, pause for a moment and baseline your metrics. It's really hard to do. It's hard to pause. It's hard to stomach the idea of measuring some of the current state because it's probably awful, which is why you're looking at changing. But here's the problem. You go about doing this, and 6 to 12 months after you launch, somebody's going to come back to you and they're going to be an executive and they're going to say, how do you know this is working? And if you're me, you're going to say, well, it's obvious. People are happier, customers aren't complaining, it's a nicer place to work. It's obvious. And they're going to say, yes, but show me data, right? I am the CFO, show me data. So if you can find the motivation, the minute to just stop and pause and baseline some metrics, 6 to 12 months down the track, you're going to be so glad you did that. It is going to hurt, right? It's always going to hurt. One of my favorite metrics is employee NPS. Would you recommend working here to a friend or colleague? It is going to hurt. You just steel yourself, you get the baseline, you just put it somewhere to the side, and then you start working on making it better. And then 6 to 12 months later, you're able to say, here's where we started, here's where we are, and here's your hard data. I think you'll get plenty of soft data. I don't think you'll actually, for yourself and for the people on and close to the train, I don't think there'll be any debate that it's working, but often that's not enough for the execs. So a bunch of recommendations around specific metrics in the book, some of the blog. There you go. Thanks, Phil. All right, so ingredients for success. Leadership, ready features, real agile teams, and the knowledge with which to execute. So let's unpick that. So leadership, and this is leading a bit to your question earlier, Brian, about the pitfall. Get your ducks in a row. When it comes to train launches and picking your train, the only real catastrophic mistake I've ever seen is not lining the executives up. So you've picked this lovely, perfect train that crosses multiple silos in your organization, and one exec in one silo is brought in, but nobody bothered to make sure the execs in the other silos are brought in. And everybody just sits down and patiently watches you run along to launch your train. And then at the 11th hour, the execs that decided they really didn't feel so great about this say, you can't have my people. And now you have half a train. So if there would be, one trap, it would be that. That would be the thing that I have seen from choosing a train perspective go catastrophic, is an executive that has the ability to go, they're my people, you can't have them, sorry about your luck. Question from Mark. What approach have you found to be most successful in value stream identification workshop? The traditional silos are well established, but the development value streams tend to be fuzzier and less tangible. Yeah, it's a really, really tricky workshop, Mark. I get the feeling you know that based on your question. I'm pretty pragmatic about all of this. I think I started with, I'm not going to fight tooth and nail for the most perfect train. My goal is to provide some visualization. I want them to see what they haven't been able to see. So for the example, one of the examples that we quote in the book, and I think there's a photo of it, we did a value stream identification for essentially a product line in a large organization. They found 500 people and 68 systems involved in that particular part of the world. And the comment from the people in the room was, "No wonder we can't deliver." And the comment from the executive was, "No wonder we can't deliver." In fact, they're so funny. They took the visualization we created in the room, post-it notes and index cards and whiteboards and flip chart paper, and digitized it because it was the most comprehensive view they had of their ecosystem. So they now use it as part of how they onboard people into their world. So when you can see it, it's a lot easier to think about what might make sense in terms of bringing people together. So visualize the world and then really start to overlay the work on it. So, well, they were quite right. They had that 500 people and 68 systems or what have you. I can remember things like there were 4 people working on the IVR. And for those who don't speak call center, that's the interactive voice recognition system that answers telephones. So it had nothing to do with the value stream, really. They'd been really complete. So when you start looking at the work and you go, well, we do all this work, but do these features, do these epics, do these changes actually impact the IVR team? No, they don't. So it's great that they recognise they were part of the ecosystem, but it was also important to understand that they weren't going to be part of the Agile release train because they weren't part of the program of change that we had in mind. Oh my goodness, bunch of questions here. Senior stakeholder management is key. Yes. Stakeholder engagement. Yes. Can we assume all change management is key workstream on the train? Yes. So, Vinay, in a Australian, New Zealand, probably UK context, we tend to talk a lot about change management as a business readiness org change function. I don't believe that's as common in the US, but I'm happy for US. Yeah, Tammy's going no, and I know I have this conversation with Adrian all the time that says, why are you people obsessed with change managers? Isn't that part of program management? Like, well, I don't know. In this part of the world, it seems if you have a big program, you have a dedicated change management team. I think the thing I've noticed is comms probably more than anything. So where I've had trains that have had change management involved in the launching of the train implementation of SAFe, a lot of their value add for us has been comms, getting communication sent out, getting communication sessions set up. That sort of thing has been really valuable to have those sorts of people around. I've never felt like you need to all change manage the change. But I do know to SAFe, that is, but that might be a personal view. In terms of if you're thinking about the business readiness of the product, epic features, what have you, that you're taking to market. So again, we tend to have change managers in this part of the world, and yes, they need to be included in the train. So that was many answers to many change management questions. Yeah, so Waldy, should it be a work stream? Part of the SPCs do, yeah. So for org change management, for implementing SAFe, yes, I see that as the work of the SPCs and the RTEs. For the org change management, in terms of I want to release a product to my business, to my market, and you have that world, then those people have to be part of the train, they have to be part of the process. Hope that managed to solve most of that. More on org management, more on stakeholder management. Yes, okay, you guys are having a little conversation among yourselves. I'm going to leave that with you. Em, have you seen arts in organisations where funding is not persistent? Scrum teams are being formed and disbanded based on CapEx funding. Oh my goodness, you people sent here to torture me. So have you seen arts in organisations where funding is not persistent? Yes. Do they form and disband teams based on CapEx funding? Not if I can help it. So one of the things that I've done in worlds where funding is not consistent is actually start to look at the history of funding for that part of the world. So often funding is actually kind of constant, even if it's very project and disjointed. The amount of money spent in a domain actually tends to be fairly constant year on year. So you, with a bit of help from a PMO or whatever the right group of people is in your organization, you might be able to understand what a baseline workforce looks like. So if you spend $10 million on your enterprise data warehouse every year, then you probably spend $10 million on your enterprise data warehouse every year, and that's a labor cost, and you can build a train that is about that size. Personally, I think the idea that you can add and remove teams at random is kind of fictional. I've got a number of clients who launched small trains with the view that they were going to add teams. It's not that easy to recruit people and onboard them. It's just not. So I don't know. Can you do it? Yes. But I would focus on, can I understand what my base capability is, and can I try and work out a system that feeds that base capability. Jack, yes. Phil, have you seen successful arts and organizations where funding is not persistent? Yes, we said that one.
I was trying to be funny. I said, have you seen successful art implementations?
Yes.
When they're
well, not with the forming and disforming, but successful art implementations without persistent funding. Yes, you can do SAFe in a project-based world. I've done it. I've done it a whole heap of places. When we were writing the book, we socialized a lot of what we were talking about. I was chatting to Robin for Lockheed Martin. They have the same thing, right? Their world is project-based. You can absolutely do this. I would try not to, though, spin up and ramp down teams every 5 minutes. Advice on balancing a large production support effort alongside or within arts. Default position for me, Kevin, is the operational support people belong on the train, with a big caveat that says context is important, and what is possible and reasonable to ask of people has to be considered there. So default position, you build it, you broke it, you fix it. That's my default position. But contractually, can I have my devs running around with pages at 3 o'clock in the morning? I don't know. Depends on my setup. How broken is my system? You've got a large production support effort there. Maybe it's just not possible. But if I do train design, that I'm going to go with a whole heap of, these are my best cases. This is the world I'd like to see, and we can compromise back from there. And so I'd start with, I want them on the train, and then I would work my way to the whatever answer I ended up to that was hopefully not too far away from where I wanted to be. Okay, I'm gonna org change. Okay, I'm gonna leave the org change question alone. I think we've talked about getting ducks in a row. I've answered a heap of questions. This is the slowest version of this talk ever done. I'm gonna move to the next slide and see what version of what questions you guys can come up with for that. So in terms of leading, so back to this leadership topic, right? So success factors in launching an agile release train, leadership, alignment of leadership is key. I think it's also important to understand that leadership is a team sport. So when I talk to people about Agile, I'm very quick to say, and you would have heard this from other people, Agile is a team sport. Agile leadership is a team sport as well. This doesn't work when you have one coach or one SPC or one RTE running around the organization trying to magic up a train launch. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's multifaceted, it's multidimensional, and it's a team sport. So when we launch trains, we have at a minimum what we call the trifecta, the RTE, product management, and system architect start to make up that leadership group. If there is an additional coach or SPC, they would be part of that. some organizations would have additional line managers or other people, but we would create a team of leaders that act as an agile team of agile leaders that own that journey to getting the train launched. So they would take an agile approach, right? So here you can see a bunch of leaders. This is their kind of like their PI plan to get to their first PI planning. Post-its, indicate different types of workshops and events, whole list of to-dos there. And we've got that leadership team giving their fist of 5, right? You are going to sign up for this. This is actually their reset of their plan. They missed their date by a country mile. And we brought them back together, and we also had executive leadership in the room and said, you have to sign up to this. You have to sign up to not pulling your people away from this. If you want to do it, we have to do it. So we build a plan like we would in PI planning, and we commit to the plan like we would in PI planning. And then on a day-to-day basis, you've got here the art leadership burning down their PI plan, right? Daily stand up, who's doing what's going on. Got to walk the talk. If you want people to buy into, we need to change and become more agile, then it starts with you demonstrating that to the organization. Plus, I'm a big fan of the team seeing how poor leaders are at doing the agile thing. Nothing quite like your team coming up to you and asking you about your velocity and your throughput and your when your next demo will be, to encourage you to actually do something. Talking from hypothetical past experience. Okay, there, that seems to be more of the same. Okay, I think we're good there. Phil, I think I got that question.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Thank you for checking on me. All right. So we've got our ducks in a row. We've formed an agile leadership team, and we've got them working as an agile team to pull together that launch. Next thing we need, bunch of ready features. Now you would think that this is kind of obvious, and here's what I've learned. PI planning, I thought for the longest time, was idiot proof. And then I discovered it was not. And the reason it's not is because if you put 100 people in a room with no features to spend 2 days breaking those features down into stories, it doesn't work. I mean, I know that's shocking to you, absolutely shocking. It was shocking to me. It's shocking to me that people do it. I think I can think of 3 occasions on which I'm aware of organizations doing this, and I'm sure there are plenty of others. There was the organization that just didn't do any readiness, turned up at PI planning. The coach panicked literally and told them to start writing features. So they walked out of PI planning with features, and then they spent 2 weeks doing PI planning to, work out the PI plan. It was interesting. They were the same organization when I met them. They were at the end of their PI, they'd finished. And I said, when are we doing PI planning again? And they went, oh, we haven't scheduled it yet. Interesting approach, folks. There was the organization that went, we don't need training. We don't need help with organizing training. In fact, we don't need anything. We're pretty good. Don't worry, Em. And someone else sent me down there just to make sure they were okay and they had a safety net. So the RTE gets up in front of the room and he says, if your role is blah, 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 now you are a Scrum Master. And if your title is blah, 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 you are a product owner. All right, we all know what we need to do. Go. I actually wish I had in this deck the photo of the wall they produced. Such a crack up. So six sprint wall, plastered in features. So there must be, I don't know, 10 features in every row, 15 rows of teams, and they don't put the string up because they realize that it's going to be too complicated to read. So they build this dot system, and you look at the dot on one card and the dot on the other card, and that tells you how the dependencies work. The plan didn't make it through the first sprint. Anyway, they did commit to it though. That was that's one of my favorite photos as well. Anyway, I have determined that the only thing that can go catastrophically wrong at PI planning is no features. If we can get into PI planning with features, we can probably manage to pull the organization through the PI planning event. Okay, any experience using force analysis to help leaders better understand the different components of change? No, Brian, I think you might be too clever for me. I have not tried that, but now I'm going to Google it. I hate to be the art that shattered fantasy.
He sent me the same question via text today as well. So he Googled something recently and is very excited about it.
Clearly, I actually have heard of it, but no, I haven't used it. Yeah, why would you be the art that shattered my fantasy? That's awful. Yep. How do you deal with arts with 100 features? Any advice to an RT or SPC, especially one that's internal and has limited ability to influence leadership decisions? Oh my goodness, Phil, are you like dropping things you may have seen somewhere into the chat channel here? So scarily 100 plus features is not necessarily unique. I wish it was. Yeah, I've watched organizations prepare over 100 features for PI planning. I know when we teach classes, we tell everyone a really simple message: do not prepare 100 features, because even if you prepare 100 features, you're still only going to take 10, 15, 20, max 30 through PI planning. So just don't do it. Do people always listen? No, I think they don't. I have a client that when we met them had a backlog of, I'm pretty sure it was 937 features. We suggested to them that they may want to cull that. Did not want to have that conversation. In the end, you can only help people who want to help, who want to be helped. I would certainly be advocating for not preparing 100 features. I think if I couldn't stop them taking 100 into PI planning, I think I would probably try and work out where I thought the real work that was going to be done was, and try and focus most of the prep effort there. Once you're normally through the first PI planning event, it starts to become a little bit clearer to the organization that they can't do that much. And I guess I'm not an internal, I'm more an external. Therefore, I do a lot of yelling and screaming at organizations that have 100 features that they want to take into PI planning. Definitely as an internal, it is going to be a struggle. There's probably some simple maths in there. We often do things like tell organizations, 2, maximum 3 features per team is all you're going to do. And just repeat that message over and over again. And when you look at that, and you'll have, like my client with 900 features, I think they had 3 feature teams. So you start doing the maths on that and you go, okay, we're not going to prepare 900, right? We can prepare, I don't know, double what you think you can get through. Let's prepare 30. You're still only going to deliver 10. But, let's move somewhere towards the realms of reality. What if the features are absolutely useless? You take what you can get. So I have certainly worked with a lot of trains where prioritization of features is really not that hard, because that's exactly what we do. We work with what's ready. So the entry criteria to PI planning is the people who have the most ready features get their features into PI planning. I've been known to lean pretty heavily on product management to say there's a bunch of stuff that isn't ready. There's a bunch of stuff that isn't ready. You can't do that to teams. You can't take it into PI planning. It's not fair. It's not the right way. It's not the right thing to do. One thing that does teach is people start to learn that only the things that are ready are going to get in, and that starts to change the pattern going forward. Weighted shortest job first to 100 features, yes.
I had a request because we are using this for chatter, and
I can see that, yeah.
And Em mentioned that when she teaches the class, she turns it off, and so she's doing great, trying to keep up with the questions here. So if you don't mind, if you put all caps question to proceed your question, if you have one for Em, that way when she looks at this, she can skip all the chatter back and forth. I'd appreciate that.
Thanks, Phil. Good thought. All right. Idiot proof, not idiot proof is the message. So how do we deal with feature readiness? Yes, of course. A feature definition of ready is absolutely what we do. It's really one of the first things we do with organizations. If they have epics, we're going to have epics broken down epics into features, and then we're going to discuss feature definition of ready. Or if they don't have epics, the first thing we're going to do is discuss feature definition of ready. We bring in a bunch of suggestions based on what we've seen. Many of those things are on this list here, and then we have a conversation with the organisation around what makes sense for them. So they buy into this, right? We don't just go here. You must do. We say here's our list, and what do you want to add, remove, what have you. People come up with interesting stuff, which is cool. This is just not a bad indication. Short description, benefit hypothesis, of course, acceptance criteria, we would use given, when, thens. A high-level solution, somebody draw some lines and some boxes and join them together and color them in, that'd be good. Obvious dependencies, I'm not trying to solve world hunger, I'm just trying to understand who I need to get into the PI planning room. So I have a particular interest in identifying external dependencies. A high-level estimate to facilitate WSJF, and internal dependencies, and who are the subject matter experts again? Who do I need to get into the room for PI planning? So really my focus around feature readiness is, how do I know enough to put a decent size on it for prioritization? How do I know who I need to get in the room for PI planning? If I can solve for those things, I'm in a pretty good spot. Not allow features to be pulled into PI planning unless it's ready. In Scrum, the Scrum has the authority to prevent a backlog item from being pulled into sprint backlog during iteration planning if it does not meet the team's definition of ready. Would the RTE have the authority to do this in SAFe, and you believe that equates to a definition of ready for features? In my view, yes. The RTE is absolutely the person I would expect to do that. And I'm certainly a big fan of strong RTEs that hold their ground. You heard me sort of say I do put this back on the product, because I think if I can correct the behavior there, that's a better bet for me. But yes, RTE first and foremost. What is your job? Protect your train, right? Same as Scrum Master, first and foremost, protect the team. RTE, protect the train. And that's really, it's so much of the difference between strong and good RTEs and others is ability to protect the train. So yeah, my thinking is aligned with yours. Once you have that definition of ready, I would build a Kanban system, because I like building Kanban systems mainly. So build a system. Takes us about a day. We sit down with an organization. This one here is looking at an epic Kanban flowing into a feature Kanban. Again, a bit like with the definition of ready, I have some ways I go about doing this. A bunch of this is in the book, but then we sit down and start to contextualize for the organization. The really important part of this is the policies, right? The green cards here are the exit policies, getting agreement on how this is going to work in the organization's context. So just taking the SAFe Kanbans and putting them on a wall doesn't make stuff happen. You've got to contextualize that for the organization. So this is, we take an organization through the approach of readiness, then we make this part of the system that they use forevermore. And we build that and visualize that as a Kanban system. And of course, we then put it on a nice big wall, which is proving unfortunate at the moment, as no doubt everyone has the same problem. However, you know, we're actually, with our clients, using Mural, or some of you probably use Miro, very similar, because it's the closest thing I can find to a physical wall. So I have a lot of flexibility in how I build it and how I manage it in terms of the visualization. This particular wall, for those who are curious, it's not curved. That's just what my camera did to it, you know, the panoramic thing. And somebody took all the epics off before I took the photo, which is very annoying. But this side here is the epic. That, of course, is their program board. And over on the side here, we have the feature wall, the pink cards being the dependency. So we're flowing both the dependencies and the features through the wall. Their Rome is in the bottom right corner, and that blank spot in the sort of top middle right corner is actually for production defects, so that they own the entire system there. Is authority or is it a common understanding? I'd like to think it was a common understanding, Brian, but if the RTE had to stamp their foot, I could live with that. Why not SAFe collaborate? I refuse to answer that on the grounds it may incriminate me. Would you be comfortable calling out a handful of companies that you believe are premier examples of? No, I would not. Yeah, I'm going to stay away from mentioning companies if that's all right, folks. It looks like Tammy's going to volunteer herself. All right. So, got an operational wall, which means we've got a definition of ready. We've done that to get to PI planning, and we've made it rinsable and repeatable. All right. Next problem: teams. So I know the Scrum Guide says 5 to 11, and I know that SAFe says 5 to 11, but M says 7 plus or minus 2, and I'm just like that. For me, it's really, really simple. It's math, right? So this is the different lines of communication or communication complexity depending on the size of the team. So 5 people, 10 lines, 9 people, 36 lines. You want to go up to that 11 suggested by Scrum and SAFe. You're up to 55 lines of communication. There is a material difference between 7 plus or minus 2 and 5 to 11. That's my view. I've never seen anything good come of large teams. They just struggle to communicate, and therefore they struggle to deliver. What is important is that those teams are complete. They are mission focused. As many folks do, I have a tendency to prefer feature teams, but you know, all things in context, of course. Brian, what's the single most valuable piece of advice you've obtained during your journey? Good grief. Don't know. Going to think about that one, Brian. Okay. So small mission-focused teams, including Scrum Master and Product Owner for someone. Yeah, there you go. I knew someone was going to ask that. Yes, because it's a line of communication, right? So absolutely, I'm including the PO and the Scrum Master, because even then there's more, right? Then there's the RT and the product manager. So even when you're at 9, the real complexity of communication is still higher than what you're seeing at 9. So yes, when my 7 plus or minus 2 includes the Scrum Master and product owner. So how do we create teams? I am a huge fan of something called self-selection, also known as squadification. This became fairly well known in this part of the world due to some blogs and some talks, and eventually a book by Sandy Mamoli and David Mole. They describe this as a facilitated process of letting people self-organize into small cross-functional teams based on the belief that people are at their happiest and most productive if they can choose what they work on and who they work with. So, facilitated process of allowing people to choose for themselves what teams they work in. I get to do this about 50% of the time. The biggest objection I get to this is leaders saying to me, what if people choose to work with their friends? No, people wouldn't, would they? I mean, no. I mean, that clearly that would be bad. People are so weird. Look, it's a really facilitated process. I've written a heap about it on the blog. There's a heap about it in both the books. You create the template, then you ask the teams to self-organize within some constraints. So it's not a free-for-all. It's a facilitated event. It takes about half a day. Even when it's hard, teams do prefer it to being told what to do. And I think for me, when I started using this, I'd reflect back on life in industry and being a manager and you know, how arrogant are we that we sit in rooms and decide we know better who would work best with who. I'm like, there's no way you could know better than the people who do the work. So that's my view. That's my favorite. Sometimes I get to do it. Sometimes I do not. How does that help other team members grow if they're not chosen? This is not school sports. Sorry, I always forget that people think this is school sports. This is not school sports. This is not pick a team captain and then they pick the people to be on a team. You pick your team. So you create spaces that represent each of the teams, and you walk over to where you want to be. And then if there are too many people in that space, then we have a talk about where we need other people and how we rebalance. But you can't be not picked because you pick for yourself. So it's not school sports. Don't worry. That's another question that does come up. What if nobody's chosen? But it's facilitated in such a way that can't happen. When I don't get to play self-selection, I instead like to play with index cards on walls. As you can see, that was incredibly stressful for poor Luke. We will visualize the people that are available to be on the train. In this particular case, colour was used to represent skill. Often colour is actually used when we do this to represent location, particularly on complex trains. So we use index cards. We use colour to help us understand. You can see here they've got a template team that they're trying to fill, and then we are trying to map those people into teams. For me, you need index cards, or in fact, I did this on Mural the other day, of course, because it's the same sort of thing. You need to have the ability to move people around and come up with different scenarios. Excel is not a good team design tool. I had one client once not listen to me. We lasted an hour before we stopped everything with a bunch of execs with Sharpies writing names on cards so that we can move to a more visual place. It's kind of fun. Self-selection is the assumption this is okay to be centralized because the train is fully funded. Won't impact the budget. If so, how does work crossing all train creation and funding? The short answer is yeah. I don't know if there is a short answer. It's probably a long answer. Yes. So certainly, if the train is all funded, that's going to be simple. Even where I deal with project-based trains or project-funded trains, I tend not to use traditional time sheeting approaches to funding. So there is a kind of more generic cost, and therefore who ends up on which team doesn't impact billing. Probably the shortest answer I can give at the moment. If you wanted to sort of understand how I play with funding in this space, there is Phil's been very good at finding the blog post. There's a blog post called Understanding Cost in a Safe World. that talks about how I build cost models, which might clarify that a little bit, but probably a little bit hard to pick open too much here, Michael. Sorry about that. Teams that are offshore and onshore. So one of my train design rules is, first and foremost, if I can have everybody in the same location, I will. Bearing in mind, I'm going to have to make a trade-off, right? I don't want a team of all testers and a team of all devs and a team of all UXs or whatever, because that's how the way the locales work. So first preference, can I have cross-functional teams, feature teams in a single location? Maybe, maybe not. If I can't, I'm going to look for time zone overlaps. So we like a minimum of 4 hours overlap for a team, because a team that can never work together is never going to team. And then our suggestion would be, if you're going to be a team spread across multiple time zones, that you are an online team. So you are 100% online all the time. You're not hybrid. You're not 3 people sitting in a room somewhere and 5 people dialing in on the phone. Everybody online, so that we have an equal playing field, right? So it's fair, it's equal communication across everybody. On your slide, is that the dev manager there looking unhappy? No. Luke was my partner in crime. He was actually a consultant as well, working with that organization. You are funny. All right. So one way or another, we want to get to teams, mission focus, less than 9 people, ideally cross-functional, ideally co-located, if not overlapping time zones, please. So that leaves us with the knowledge with which to execute. This slide isn't in the SAFe courseware anymore, but forever, this was the message. Train everyone, launch trains. That was it. There was no implementation roadmap. There was no snake with 12 steps. There was train everybody, launch trains. That was it. Number 1 cause of train wrecks. Number 1, I took 100 people. I decided that I wanted to work completely differently than how they had ever worked before, but I did not bother to give them the education on how to do that. And it didn't work. I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, they had no chance. No chance. Number 1 cause of train wrecks. I can't afford training. I don't want to do training. My people already know everything. Whatever, right? This is the challenge. So here's what we hear. But my teams are already agile. But I don't have the budget to train everyone. You mean everyone except the vendor teams, right? And contractors. You wouldn't train them, would you? Every time. Maybe your teams are already agile. So far, I haven't actually entered an organization where what they meant by agile was what I meant by agile. But even if they were, they're probably not all doing the same version of agile. So for me, I've yet encountered the organization where we've gone SAFe. We didn't have to change any of the team formations, and they were already doing good agile. And maybe if those things were true, maybe this becomes interesting and you just have to, introduce them to SAFe. But I've never seen that. We want to align everyone. We want everyone doing the same version of agile. SAFe says use SAFe for teams. Whatever you do have to align everybody onto a single page. You don't have the budget to train everyone. You don't have the budget not to train anyone. It is a hugely, hugely expensive mistake. Training is not expensive. It's just not. People not knowing what to do and spinning, as we would call it, that's expensive. Training's not expensive. And you've got to include your vendor teams and contractors. And when I worked in industry, my rule of thumb was And then, I didn't like this. I had to pay for it initially. And I can remember going through this struggle. And it was going to be either I said to the vendor, train your people. Then I had a couple of challenges. Would they send them to SAFe training or just some random training? Would they send them to the same vendor that I would? And would they do it at all? Or let's just accept I could go and hire people with the right training, but those people aren't going to know my environment. So at this point, you've got a group of people who you've been working with for a bunch of years, and they are knowledgeable about your area, but not knowledgeable about SAFe. A pretty small investment to put them in a classroom for 2 days. What I used to do with my vendors, sorry, vendors on the phone, if you don't like this, is say, I will pay for the training, but you can't bill me 2 days of consulting for training your people, and we'll call it even. I don't know. You've got to do something. You can't do nothing. Okay. Oh my goodness. Tammy, why did they change? Train everyone, launch trains. Apparently it was too simple. Yep. So train everyone, launch trains, too simple. Hence we now have a 12-step roadmap so that everybody knows what to do to launch a train. That was that's how I understand it. Michael, how do you navigate a resistance to training in an internal team you've been handed to share? Oh my goodness. I wish I knew, Michael. I can tell you as an external party, we refuse to work with organisations that will not train their people because we have such a moral disconnect with those organisations. So as I said, the start of this session, we just believe you have a moral obligation to educate people on their roles. And I can't stomach an organisation that has so little respect for people. I'm not sure what I would do internally. When I was internal, I had enough leverage, I guess, in the position I was in to make it happen. Sorry, not a great answer, Michael. Jack, cost accountings, yes. Earned value management, no. But cost accounting, yes. Same link that I mentioned to Phil earlier, how to understand cost in a SAFe world should give you a view on how I've done that. And you know how to find me, and you can always quiz me later if that doesn't answer the question.
Well, my question was actually, I know that it's done in government, in the DoD, but have you seen it in businesses?
Yeah,
actually,
not
that's the government uses. Do you see it in businesses? That was my question.
Oh, sorry. So earned value management, no, and I was never a program manager, so I'm not sure how prevalent it actually is in this part of the world, and it's not something I ever spend a lot of time looking at. But cost accounts and epics and story points and all that sort of stuff, yes. In enterprises, yes, all the time. It's part of how do you make SAFe work in a project-driven world? You have to be able to link it back to the cost accounts. And the how is in that blog post. Phil, what if corporation prohibits providing training to non-employees? Oh my goodness. Yes,
I had a Fortune 10 customer that 250,000 people working there, and they prohibited any training. Their solution was to have a PM at one of their vendors go get their SPC so they could do their own training. And my question for you is, do you believe that the continuity of the messaging and training is important across an ARC, or not so much?
Yeah, we do. So, for example, if we're launching a multi-country train, we will have pretty agile people at every location delivering training, so that it's one message from one vendor. And if the corporate couldn't pay, we would suggest that corporate should say, this is our vendor, and therefore you should engage them, and that's how this should work. Interesting. I know the question you raised there came up when I was talking to Cecile from that French government agency. Anyway, they're the same thing in France. It's a problem for them. and I don't know if I got to the bottom of what they do, but yes, I would try to find a way to get some consistency in messaging. I mean, I think you've got a real interesting challenge because, SAFe for Teams training, part of the value proposition there is we're going to put people in their teams and those teams are going to start to form. So if you have vendor people inside teams and you can't train them as a team, that sounds interesting. Sometimes I look at some of this stuff and go, these organizations in a position to be ready for SAFe, or does someone actually need to go, you know what, let's go look at our corporate policies and how we partner before we go down this path? I don't know.
And I just want to throw out one comment on that, and is that being an external coach and being an internal coach are much, much different, and you can walk away, you can say no. Whereas internally, if you're an SPC and a senior VP says, this is how we're going to do it, unfortunately, the answer is, we can launch an ART without SAFe for Teams. Yeah, we can have 3 RTEs because we want to make sure that we don't lay anybody off. That those are real stories. But anyway, I want to make sure it didn't get lost. Justin had a comment in here about the implementation roadmap being so much stuff. So I want to make sure that you got to that one.
I'm not sure I disagree, Justin. I think the focus on training does cause a heap of angst. And again, have, I guess, the advantage of being external. We basically substituted out consulting days for training days. That's how we've actually managed this over time. I'm pretty sure we don't spend any more time on site with clients. We actually find that it's easier to work with a client that we've been through training with, and then we can just run them through how to do stuff. If we have to teach you at the same time that we're trying to run the workshop, it's actually slower. So we just looked at the maths and went, we think training's a faster path for you, and it's not going to cost you any more, or not materially more anyway. But yes, I think you're right. I think the amount of training is challenging. We're also very clear and specific about who needs to do what. And for most people, it's 1 course. For some people, it's 2 courses. And the only person who really tends to get tortured, certainly if you work with us, is the RTE. We make the RTE go to leading SAFe, product owner, product manager, scrum master, SAFe for Teams, because that's 8 days I get to spend telling the RTE how to be an RTE. So, but other than that, most people are only doing one or 2 courses. We also spend a lot of time talking about how the courses build on each other. So we were actually having this debate with a client recently and reminding them that we want to do product owner and we want to do Scrum Master and then we want to do SAFe for Teams and we're going to do SAFe for Teams for a couple of 100 people, right? So we need product owners and Scrum Masters who know their role so they can sit with their teams and support their teams through that training. So we're also just, it's a scaling approach. So we put a lot of emphasis on that when we get into the conversation with folks around all the classes. Hopefully that helps a bit. Jack, there are many metrics in SAFe. Other than PPM, what is your favorite metric for an ART or the most valuable metric for a portfolio? My favorite metric is employee NPS. Would you recommend working here? I really believe if you can create places that people enjoy to work, the rest will come. I honestly believe that. If I had a second, it's probably cycle time, some sort of throughput method measure. I really have found that being able to understand the value stream from a delivery perspective and how long it takes us to get through that, and then how to optimize that is so much of the success. That I don't know. They're my favorites. Are they the right ones? I don't know. They're the ones I like. 15 minutes. Oh my goodness. We covered everything. I don't know. Let's see. Only if you stop asking questions. I mean, it's a 2-way street, folks. So let me continue a little bit. So how do we launch trains? We use a 7-day quick start. The quick start being SAFe's 1 week all-in approach. A couple of changes if you do that with us. One is SAFe Scrum Master will be immediately before the quick start, so that they learn the role and they go and do the role, because otherwise they're going to forget. We take that spare day at the end and we make it the day at the start, and we do team building. So we call it team day, team formation day, train day. We might run a self-selection event. But we will do things that are focused on team building. So name the train, name the teams, have the teams build product boxes that reflect who they are, share them back with each other, build working agreements, maybe teach a bit of collaboration skills, facilitation skills. But that is a 1-day investment in building what I call the social fabric of the Agile release train. Then we go on to the standard 2-day SAFe for teams, immediately followed by 2 days of PI planning. If you haven't done it, you probably think it's nuts. I thought it was nuts when I hadn't done it. And then I tried it, and I have not launched a train any other way since, I don't know, 2015, I think. This is the only way we launch trains, all in, all at once. It's not perfect, but it's step change, right? It's take people out of the day-to-day for a week, teach them a new way of working, have them plan to work in the new way, then go back into the office and start working in the new way. Not perfect, but step change. I think my favorite comment was from the organization that was 100% waterfall, and we did this with. About a month after, one of the Scrum Masters who had been a project manager or lead on the waterfall project says to me, we've delivered more in the last 4 weeks than we delivered in the last 2 years. I mean, it's not true, but what an illustration of their experience and how they felt about it. Okay, so that's the train launch stuff. There's a little bit of operational stuff. I think there's 4 or 5 ideas in here. How about I hit the 4 or 5 ideas, so you got the content, then you can ask me questions until Phil kicks you off the phone. How's that sound?
Well, it's your Zoom, Em, so I probably won't. Well, I am co-host, but I don't think I can actually kick you off. So
okay, so I have to kick you guys off. That's going to be awkward. In fact, maybe you should have told me that earlier. I feel like I could have shut down some of the questions, and I'm out. All right. So you launched your train. How do you keep it on the track? I love this phrase, this thinking. It's from Woody Zull. Woody Zull's one of the thought leaders behind the mob programming movement. His view is we spend too much time focusing on the negative and trying to fix it. And what we should do is find the things that work and do more of them. And he calls it turning up the good. So we have a bunch of patterns, which some of them are from Tribal Unity, some of them are not, but ways you can turn up the good. So if innovation and planning, or time for innovation and planning is a good thing, what would it mean to do that more? So what we do is we take some of those ideas, so preparation for PI planning and innovation and burning down technical debt, and apply them to every team, every iteration. So rule of thumb, and organizations do this differently, 10% on what we call discovery, which is feature definition for future PIs, 10% on innovation, which is kind of a catch-all for how do we get better. So it's really just giving the teams time back to improve. Some of them will use it for innovation, some of them will use it for learning, education, what have you. Our only rule is they're transparent around how they use the time. Tech debt, what have you. So anyway, if the things that if innovation and planning, if doing that stuff, if that sprint is important, how do we build it into what we do all the time? If ArtSync is a good choice, how about we do it every day as opposed to once or twice a week? So we like a pattern called Cocktail Hour. Got the idea from Henrik Nieberg's book, Lean from the Trenches. It's a set of cascading stand-ups with what is the equivalent of ArtSync. happening every day at 9:30 in this example for 15 minutes. So instead of 1 hour or whatever once a week, 15 minutes every day, time's the same, but now I have fast feedback, small batches of information. So it's lean, right? It's a lean play. Every train I've done this with has continued doing it forever. We launch trains this way. It seems to be a little bit harder to shuffle into it if you weren't launched this way, but we just launch trains this way, and they just keep doing it. They love it. If you learn this pattern, then you have that daily feedback cycle. How could we turn up, inspect, and adapt? So if it's good to reflect at the end of the program increment and come up with ways to improve, what about we do some sort of reflection and learning every iteration? So we call it a bubble up. We ask every team at the end, after their retro, at the end of each iteration, to bring their challenges outside the team's control to the train leadership, and we start to burn down those issues. Also gives us a really nice list of stuff to take into inspect and adapt if we don't burn through all those issues during the course of the event. Oh, that's good. My Mac is going to die. So that get interesting. I'm going to, do I have an answer? All right, if I don't get a power cord, I am going to lose you guys. Really sorry. Give me 1 second.
While we're waiting for Em to get back, I just wanted to encourage you guys, if we were in face-to-face, you could make some connections. So if you saw people asking questions that resonated, feel free to direct message them and connect. It's a great way to, make new contacts. Those of you that are internal change agents, these meetups can really give you a new perspective. Those of you that are working on a poster child of good SAFe, get some appreciation for what you've built by listening to some of these questions.
Sorry, folks. So that's interesting. One Zoom call runs my battery completely dry. Who knew? Sorry. Not in my normal office today, so a bit disoriented. Look, last of our turn up the good patterns. If PI planning is good, what would it mean to bring the train together every iteration? So 1 hour, first hour of every sprint, or any hour, doesn't really matter. Bring everybody together, spend time together, build the social fabric of the organisation. You can see there a bunch of folks playing games and doing good things. But it's about human connection, right? Sharing information, learning together, communicating together. So bottom line, folks, it's all about people. For me, it's all about people. Probably back to the metrics question somebody asked me earlier. What's my favorite metric? Employee NPS. Why? It's all about people. So that's my view on SAFe and the art of avoiding a train wreck. The books are there, Tribal Unity and the Art of Avoiding a Train Wreck. My details, Adrian's details, even though she couldn't make it today, and happy to answer questions. There are no cocktails in cocktail hour, Phil, which upset Adrian a lot, actually. In fact, she complains a lot.
The Dan Pink video that we've all seen 75 times.
Oh, yeah.
About beer and cake,
Beer and cake.
And so I was just curious if that was just a Atlassian thing or if that was an Australian thing. So
there is often Unity Hour. It wouldn't necessarily involve beer, but it would involve cake and donuts and coffee. I think beer is more an after hours thing. At the end of PI planning, there's beer, but everyone has that, right?
No, but thank you so much, Em. You're
no worries.
Every time I hear you speak, I learn something new, and it's been an honor to have you out here at the meetup. Definitely appreciate it. Love that you provided your contact info there. I know a couple people asked about the video recording. I think Em will probably end up providing a link to it, and then I'll post that in the meetup site so that you'll have access to it.
Yep, I will do that. I'm lucky I got a cord for the battery, but yes, I will do that.
Cool. You got some thank yous coming in through chat there.
You do. You do. Oh my goodness. Thank you, folks. Well, it's fun. All the questions were fun. I know I teased you, but all the questions were fun. It would have been nowhere near as much fun without the questions.
As always, it was awesome. Thank you, Em.
Thank you, Tammy. Good to see you.
Love seeing you again. Bye.
All right, well, have an awesome rest of your day, Em, and I'm sure I'll see you on Slack at some point. So
Yeah, it sounds like it. Thank you very much for joining, folks. Have a good evening for those in the US, and enjoy the rest of your day for those in this part of the world.